The Nintendo DS changed handheld gaming forever, but what's a bit of a shame is that these games haven't had the chance to change platforms and discover new players in all that time. I'm Jimmy for Cultured Vultures, and these are the Nintendo DS games still stuck on the handheld.
Agents are go!
In 2005, a quirky rhythm game for the DS known as Osutatoke Ouendan was released, revolving around tapping and touching markers on the DS touchscreen in beat with music. Fun! But what really elevated it was its absurd, light-hearted premise. The Ouendan are a Japanese cheer squad that shows up when someone's in trouble and encourages them to overcome their problems by using the power of song and dance. Because we'll apparently watch absolutely anything over here if it's adapted into a musical, Western gamers loved this concept, and Ouendan was a popular import title. This was enough to catch Nintendo and Innis's attention, and the two companies went to work on making an Americanized take by the name of Elite Beat Agents. Elite Beat Agents plays like Ouendan, and its primary appeal is the aesthetics and music used for Western audiences. Ouendan's manga-style presentation was swapped for a Western comic book style, the music was changed from J-pop to popular Western songs, and the Ouendan were replaced with government agents who had a similar role. Elite Beat Agents was a critical darling in the West and a popular import game in Japan, which is funny to reflect on, but sales were, in the Reginator's words, personally disappointing. While Ouendan itself received a direct sequel in Japan, the IP has since languished. At the very least, the franchise managed to inspire the creation of OS, which went on to become its own rhythm behemoth in the PC space. Here's another behemoth that's somehow been forgotten. Final Fantasy Tactics on the PlayStation is one of the most beloved strategy RPGs of all time, boasting challenging tactical battles as well as a mature plot filled with political intrigue. So obviously they've done nothing with the idea in years. Square did seem to have a winner on their hands though, and followed up on the PS1 game in 2003 with Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. 5 years on from that, they would return to Ivalice once more with Final Fantasy Tactics A2. Both Advance and A2 took the story in a rather different direction from the 1998 original, featuring children who are magically transported into the world of Ivalice. Yes, it's an isekai. Though Advance's interpretation of Ivalice was actually a dream world, A2's Ivalice was the real deal, with the story even being set just after the events of Final Fantasy XII in a new region known as Jaland. Tactics A2 retained much of the fundamentals of the sub-series, with grid-based battles and an in-depth job system. As with Tactics Advance, A2 included a lore system governed by dodges, which would restrict certain actions in each battle. Failure to comply would lead to penalties like being unable to revive fallen units for the rest of the battle. Harsh, yes, but it's less severe than Tactics Advance, whose judges would literally send characters to jail mid-battle for breaking laws.
You're stealing. Right to jail.
Though A2 didn't quite reach the same critical heights as Advance, it remains a fantastic strategy game and one of the DS's highlights. But again, it's odd that Square are in no rush at all to do anything with the series. Even during the nadir of Sonic's career in the mid to late 2000s, there were still some notable bright spots, especially on handhelds. The Sonic Advance games don't reach the same heights as the original Genesis games, but they were still solid, exciting 2D platformers in their own right. So it should be no surprise then that Dimps, the trilogy's developer, returned for Sonic Rush on the Nintendo DS in 2005. Sonic Rush retains the design philosophy of the Advance trilogy, which is basically an emphasis on exhilarating speed and visual spectacle. And as with the Advance trilogy, Rush features multiple playable characters, each with their own special abilities, as newcomer Blaze the Cat makes her debut here. Rush's biggest and most influential addition is the boost mechanic. By pressing and holding Y, you'll rocket forwards at blistering speeds, mowing down enemies in the way. Sonic games have always had ways to get bursts of speed on demand, but the boost took things to another level. It was such a successful mechanic that it formed the core of nearly every major 3D Sonic game since, starting with 2008's Unleashed. Still, Sonic Rush itself is a bit overlooked nowadays, and it deserves a port or remaster to modern platforms at the very least. This game was far more influential to the series than time might remember. Mario and Luigi as a sub-series has had a pretty interesting run, hasn't it? While still being the turn-based RPG with action commands that made Superstar Saga beloved, Partners in Time gave combat some major shake-ups, as your skills and spells basically come entirely from consumable items. More importantly, and I probably should have led with this, the bros spent most of their game teamed up with their baby selves, who level up and have equipment just like their older counterparts. It's weird, but it works. Outside of battle, while Mario and Luigi still explore vibrant areas filled with charm and humour, the world is far less interconnected. Instead, time portals scattered throughout Peach's castle each lead to a different self-contained area in the past. Partners in Time remains one of the few entries to remain trapped on its original platform, as its Wii U Virtual Console release is now impossible to access, technically legally. While its predecessor and successor received 3DS remakes, Alpha Dream sadly went bankrupt soon after the release of Bowser's Inside Story on 3DS. Thankfully, the series lives on, and hope remains that this game will one day return. It's been longer than 358 days though. Released in 2009, Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days focuses on the life that Roxas, who was Sora's nobody, lived before he returned to Sora at the end of Kingdom Hearts 2. If you're not a Kingdom Hearts fan, it might sound like I just spoke Dutch or some kind of Swahili. Most Kingdom Hearts games are relatively linear affairs, as the protagonists go from world to world solving problems along the way. It's a familiar gameplay and story loop for anyone with any JRPG experience. Days, on the other hand, is a mission-based game where Roxas is sent out by Organisation 13 to Disney Worlds for various operations, like eliminating Heartless, conducting recon, and even occasional stealth and espionage, but nothing quite as sneaky as this. Jesus. Accompanying this shake-up is a unique grid-based progression system where everything, including equipment, items, and even levels, are panels that must be equipped and arranged in a limited space. Outside of Kingdom Hearts Recoded, this is the hardest the series has ever leaned into the RPG side of action RPG, as the panel system opens up a level of character customization not seen in other entries. Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days, along with Recoded, were eventually remade and brought to modern audiences via cutscene compilations in HD 1.5 Remix and 2.5 Remix respectively. While this did help newcomers catch up for Kingdom Hearts 3, the unique core gameplay loop that defined Days remains trapped on the DS to this day. A strikeout for preservation. These days, Intelligent Systems are known primarily for Fire Emblem, which is probably having its best ever moment right now. But while the studio was able to save that series from the brink of death, Advance Wars hasn't been quite as lucky, with only a remake of the first 2 games seeing a release in 2023 thanks to Way Forward. The last proper entries from Intelligent Systems were the DS entries Dual Strike and Days of Ruin. Dual Strike, the third mainline installment, builds off of prior entries, with its narrative being a direct sequel that sees the Black Hole Army return once more. Days of Ruin, meanwhile, follows the trend of games from the mid to late 2000s undergoing dark and gritty reboots. Thankfully for Intelligent Systems, this worked out a lot better critically than others' attempts, but Days of Ruin has overall been quite forgotten as a whole. While both games iterated on past entries by introducing new unit types and terrain, one of Dual Strike's biggest additions is the dual front mechanic, where players do battle on 2 fronts at once, each represented by one of the DS screens and headed up by different commanding officers. Meanwhile, Days of Ruin was the first entry in the series to add full-blown online multiplayer. Unfortunately, despite all being fantastic strategy games, Advance Wars remains in relative obscurity compared to its younger and far more successful cousin. The unfortunate timing, to say the least, and subsequent delay for Reboot Camp didn't help matters, and it's likely that these 2 entries will never see the sun again. You just gotta love a bit of Golden Sun if you grew up with the GBA and maybe even the DS. Camelot Software's Golden Sun is a beloved series known for iterating on traditional RPG class systems and turn-based combat, while also featuring a plethora of puzzles to give its overworld a Zelda-light feel. Set in the flat world of Wayard, the first entry in the series featured a young group of heroes struggling to stop the return of a dangerous power known as alchemy, while its sequel, The Lost Age, flipped the narrative and put you in the shoes of an antagonist you spent the first game chasing after. Neat. Golden Sun Dark Dawn doesn't change things up much, being a continuation of what made the previous entries so good. Its story is set 3 decades after The Lost Age and stars the children of the previous entries as heroes as they investigate a new phenomenon known as psi energy vortexes. While Dark Dawn is a fundamentally solid RPG, it also ended on a massive cliffhanger, one we've not seen a continuation for in the decades since. Given that the devs Camelot are all in on developing Mario sports games these days, a sequel sadly seems pretty unlikely. Despite this, Golden Sun remains beloved by its fans, some of whom would take a sequel at all costs. If a new entry were to happen, however, a re-release of past entries, especially Dark Dawn, on modern platforms would be practically mandatory to make this series a star once again. It's a bit hard to keep up with Dragon Quest sometimes as it's spread over so many platforms. Dragon Quest IX on the DS, as with other entries, stars a silent protagonist, but for the first time in the series their appearance is customizable. Your hero is a Celestian, which is an angel tasked with aiding mortals in order to collect energy to feed to Yggdrasil, a mighty tree that will allow the Celestian to enter the realm of the Almighty. And everything goes totally fine and everyone lives happily forever immediately. No, joking, your hero is attacked, causing them to lose their wings and fall to earth, along with the fruit of Yggdrasil, known as figs. Your journey from there revolves around retrieving the figs, which, in Dragon Quest tradition, means exploring an overworld, bashing monsters in turn-based battles, and solving every town's problems. Dragon Quest IX is famous for its incredibly expansive postgame, which revolves around the Grotto system. Throughout the game, players can find treasure maps that lead to optional, randomly generated dungeons, each housing monsters and loot of varying power. These maps could also be traded if the game was in sleep mode, which was a hugely popular mechanic for Japanese audiences that would go on to inspire Nintendo Street Pass and Spot Pass for the 3DS. The more you know. At over 5 million units sold worldwide, Dragon Quest IX was the most successful entry in the series prior to 11, finally giving DQ a financial foothold in the West. Unfortunately though, despite this, Dragon Quest IX has yet to see any sort of re-release. Given that the Dragon Quest series is now more popular worldwide than it's ever been, perhaps the hourglass for that to happen is already ticking? Or is it trickling? Now, Phantom Hourglass is a game that sounds like it should be a gimmicky disaster, but it's actually an imaginative and charming adventure that deserves a second lease of life. Though Phantom Hourglass's perspective and gameplay lean towards the style of the 2D Zelda entries, it stands out from the pack by making extensive use of the touchscreen. Nearly all of Link's actions, abilities, and tools depend on different stylus motions and uses. Wind Waker's sailing mechanic has also been adapted for touchscreen, with Link now plotting a course on a sea chart that the SS Linebeck will follow, and this time the ship can also be upgraded with a variety of parts, which also changes its appearance. The biggest new addition to Phantom Hourglass has to be the Temple of the Ocean King, a dungeon with time limit and stealth mechanics that sees Link sneaking to and from safe zones, avoiding the invincible phantoms as he goes. That Phantom Hourglass itself dictates how much time you have outside of safe zones before your health starts draining and gets filled with more sand as you progress the story. Sure, the Temple of the Ocean King does get repetitive, but few other Zelda games were as creative with the hardware they launched on. Given that the Switch has a touchscreen, and presumably so will the Switch too, a remaster or remake of this game could work as a nice follow-up after they finally give us the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess ports that everyone's been clamoring for. It's a mystery what they've been waiting for with those, eh? Pokemon spin-offs are usually much more creative than the main series. Some of them are also Pokemon Rumble U, but that's not really the point I'm making here, okay? None are quite as beloved, however, as the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games, particularly Explorers of Time, Darkness, and Sky. The Mystery Dungeon series features roguelike dungeon crawlers, with players taking a small team of Pokemon into randomly generated caves, mountains, and hollows, braving the dangers within for loot, rescue missions, and potential new recruits. The Mystery Dungeon series at large brings more mature plots to the table with darker themes than you'd expect from the mainline series, such as amnesia, self-sacrifice, and even mob hysteria. Explorers of Time, Darkness, and Sky take things further with a time travel plot featuring incredibly high stakes. The Explorers games don't innovate much on the gameplay front, simply expanding the dungeon crawling loop with more content polish and new Pokemon. It's really the story that got the most love from developers and fans alike, filled with charming, well-developed characters and heart-wrenching moments. The obligatory third version upgrade that improved on Time and Darkness, which is Explorers of Sky, even gave its supporting characters time in the limelight with new episodes depicting their backstories. Outside of the remake of the Rescue Team games for the Switch, the Mystery Dungeon games seem to have been mostly forgotten by Nintendo and the Pokemon Company, but to be fair, the Pokemon Company seem to forget to print more than, like 6 cards when they launch a new set these days, you fools. A shame though, as the spin-offs are among Pokemon's best, and Explorers of Sky is regarded as the peak of the sub-series. Remake time? Or maybe they should explore a brand new game? Outro gang, do you know how lucky you are? Because everyone who gets all the way to the outro right will then go and pull a shiny Charizard. It's true, I know my Pokemon, look. See? No offers please, I know what I have. Here's a question for you though, right? Would you be interested in a separate second channel, so technically a third channel, on Pokemon cards, and we can just chill out? I can open some packs, I can show you my cards, it'll be a nice good time, and I won't get any of you into debt. Would you like that? Be sure to let me know your thoughts on that down below. I've been Jimmy for Cultured Vultures. It's been good to have you, and thanks for watching. It's the Pokeball.